Welcome to the Divine Style podcast, where the journey to self-love and spiritual awakening begins. I'm your host, Gerlinda Stella, a psychic medium, intuitive life coach, and guide on your path to self-discovery. Here we delve deep into the heart of what it means to truly know and love oneself. Today's conversation promises to be as enlightening as it is empowering. Our guest is Emma Willmann. Her story is one of profound transformation, marked by her experiences in a spiritual cult that paradoxically opened the door to her ultimate liberation. Through these experiences, Emma has learned to release the shackles of external control and embrace her true power, guiding others to do the same. Emma has a background as a criminal prosecutor. She has since pivoted her skills towards championing women's empowerment. From Brisbane to the global stage, she's a certified image consultant, mindset coach, and embodiment facilitator, empowering women to uncover and expand their identities. Join us as we explore our evolving selves. Emma, this is going to be a great conversation. We already got started before I pressed record. And today I really want to talk to you about something that you're passionate about, which is identity and changing your identity and how that can be fluid. I think as humans, we tend to get quite fixed in our ego about who we are and what that means. I think some of your story, when I read your bio, it's crazy. Like one of the first things you mentioned is being in a religious cult, which is pretty scary.
Well, when you're born into a cult, it's not scary because you don't realize that you're in a cult. But when you come out of it, you're like, damn, that's heavy. That's really heavy. But yeah, that experience really it shaped who I am today. And it really fueled my passion for helping people understand their own identity and find freedom through that.
How old were you when you sort of realized, oh, I was in a cult?
I was in my early 20s. I think I was in a bookstore in Brisbane City and I picked up this book and it was like an encyclopedia of cults. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. And I was flicking through it and I found the church that I grew up in. And I was like, oh, I spent the first 15 years of my life in this church, not realizing that it was actually a cult. I mean, in retrospect, there's a high degree of control over our lives and our thoughts. But that was really what gave me permission to start critiquing or examining what I thought to be just normal and go, did this really serve me? How has this affected me? What flow on effects has it had in my life? And then I started editing my belief system and I've really been on a deconstruction journey since then.
Oh, wow. It's amazing how deep these things root into our subconscious to the point that, like you said, it makes up who we are. So from sort of having that realization and going through that, you mentioned to me that there was like cults are everywhere.
Often we think about cults as being some weird sex thing, or something you have to shave your head and drink the Kool-Aid. But, those kind of cults are just the extreme version of the degree of control over our thoughts and our beliefs and our mind that another entity has. And there's sort of like a sliding spectrum, but human beings, we gravitate towards belief systems because it's what we feel like is going to help us belong. When we're born into a family, there's a degree to which your family has a belief system which you just inherit. And if you're not willing to, or you don't have a reason to examine that belief system, you might be getting a certain outcome in your life and you don't know why. And until you trace it back to the belief system and to the thoughts which make up that belief system, you won't be able to see the correlation with the emotions that you're feeling or the behaviors that you have and the outcomes that you're getting. So I think, my story in being born into a cult is the extreme version, but it's able to enlighten other people as to how some of their life is actually pre-programmed because of those belief systems they've inherited.
How did you sort of confront your family, or how did that go down?
Well, it was a gradual thing. My family actually left when I was 15, and they didn't leave because they figured out it was a cult. They left because they had a interpersonal dispute with someone else, and they were like, we're leaving. And so they left. And it was a big vacuum of any kind of spirituality or teaching. And so even though we were out, I never really, it didn't really change my beliefs. I still had all of that subconscious, thoughts going on in my head every day. And then I sort of gently migrated my way to what I thought was more freedom, which was, just the local Christian church. And I sat in and around that for a number of years. And I started to see similar patterns in this little local church as well. It was more subtle, but I was like, wow, that's really interesting how people disagreeing or people having their own beliefs which don't concur with everyone else is actually frowned upon and seen as kind of undermining people, rather than there's room for us all to challenge beliefs and for us to have different perspectives and be at different places on the journey.
One of those underlying things that we're told not to question. And if
Yeah.
somebody is getting upset when you're asking these questions, they should be encouraged instead of sort of squashed down, shouldn't they?
And a big part of that is because, and this comes back to identity, when our identity is rooted in something like our religious beliefs, we can't actually separate a person speaking about an idea and a personal attack. So if I identify as being Christian, if you say anything that undermines or brings into question anything that I believe about Christianity, you're attacking me. You're not challenging an idea or exploring an idea. You're personally attacking me. And that's why identity work is so important, because we don't need to get triggered by people asking questions. And so I guess with my family, it was in my 20s that I started to ask a few questions like, how did we end up in that organization? What was going on in your life at the time? And really, I asked those questions over 10, 15 years. And it wasn't until more recently that my father opened up to me about what the situation was at the time. And really, it was that my parents were looking for acceptance and belonging, and they were wanting to find a way where they could feel like they were good and they were right. And this organization offered them a chance to tick boxes so that they could be good people. And they've taken responsibility for the impact it had on our lives and on our relationship, like as parents and children. And it really dictated so much of our lives. There were so many things we weren't able to do, places we weren't able to go. Like we didn't celebrate Christmas or birthdays or Easter. And there were so many experiences as a child of just feeling like on the outer and just excluded. And so belonging and inclusion has been a big part of my work in helping other people feel like they're part of the fold.
That's really cool. I think you're very one of the few that have had a lot of family support. So it's very lucky and very blessed in that way. How did you find it affected you spiritually?
Oh my goodness. I actually worked with a spiritual abuse counselor for 2 years, so I had a lot of time to reflect on this. But in a nutshell, what it did was it turned me against myself. So when you have an external authority telling you what's what and how to be, you learn to distrust the voice you have inside, which is actually true spirituality. It's your divinity internally, and you learn to quieten that and listen to the external voice. And quite often there's the tension between the two, and you actually, all of the sensations in your body, your natural intuition, your compass, your sense of mind-body connection, all of that is a very hostile environment, because you're trying to quieten what you're experiencing as a human instead of tuning into it and working with it. So I've described it before, like it is one of the most intimate forms of abuse, and even compared to something sexual, for example, because it's your whole psyche that is you've turned against your whole psyche. And the only way that you know how to function is to listen to what they're telling you, the person or the organization that has control over you.
That's huge, isn't it? It makes me want to cry because I get on such a deep level, because that's the true you, like you said, psyche, which is another word for spirit. It's that essence of who you are. So if somebody listening feels like, uh-oh, I think maybe I've experienced this, or maybe I have experienced this, what do you think would be the first steps for them?
Well, even if you don't feel like you are in a cult, maybe you're attending CrossFit and you're finding that your whole world is being shaped by CrossFit. No, you can benefit from what I've learned in my life experiences just by observing yourself and observing your thoughts and actually tracing them back to where they came from. For example, it might be the thoughts that you have about money, like money is dirt, 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 dirt. And where did I learn that thought? Like, who did I pick that up from? Who were the influential people in my life who taught me to believe that about money? or about my body. And you start doing these kind of excavations where you trace it back to its origin. And you're like, wow, I picked that up from my auntie, and she was a real exerciser and a real dieter. And she said, you've got to look after yourself. Like, women need to be da, 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 da. And to a degree, we've all had that in various areas of our life. And it's just a matter of, is that belief system serving me now? We all need to be conditioned in some way in order to grow up and to fit into society. But there's a certain point in which those belief systems stop serving us and they start becoming constraints. And that's generally when I start working with people, is when they feel that the discomfort of their current situation is so great that the discomfort of change or the fear of change becomes attractive, right? There's this crossover point where they're like, I can't go on like this anymore. And it shows up in lots of areas. It shows up in relationships. It shows up in people's, earning capacity in the way they run their businesses. It shows up in the relationship with their body. It shows up in anxiety and different ailments, often in the gut. All these ways in which our spirit is speaking to us and saying, you were made for freedom. You were made to be expressed, and there are constraints in the way you're expressing and showing up that have come from this belief system.
Do you have a background in law? Right, which is very rules orientated, very black and white, very sort of based on beliefs and things that have already been sort of proven, I guess, in terms of cases and things like that. What made you go into law, but then also change out?
Yeah, well, there was two things that made me go into law. One was I have such an advocate's heart, and whenever I see situations where somebody is having power used over them or they are powerless, I really feel moved to come in and to speak up for those who can't speak up for themselves. And so that advocate's heart has stayed with me beyond my legal career and into my image consulting and identity work career. But more specifically, I read a lot of John Grisham as a teenager. And I think that I was attracted to that system of laws and right and wrong. It's a power system, right? I was attracted to the thing that I had been brought up in. And there was a point at which I ended up as a criminal prosecutor. I felt like this system actually doesn't work, or it's not really getting to the heart of what it's meant to. And I really think I was attracted to law because I grew up in a legalistic religious cult. I can argue from both sides. My brain works in patterns and flow charts, and I can see all of the legal arguments for anything. But moving beyond that was a call to really live from a place of heart rather than head. And that's what I love doing.
So what a huge change though too. And how did you find that transition out of that? Because I guess change is transitions too, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because your identity would have been wrapped up with I'm a lawyer, and you spent years. I mean, you had to pass bar exams. I mean, to get into that, that's a huge life commitment when people are making these choices in life to do these uni degrees, and we get all these sort of certifications, and then to then be like, I love how you sort of spoke about your advocate's heart and how it's sort of gone through the journey with you. But how was that transition from law? And did you go straight into image consulting, or was there something?
It was hugely disorienting, to be honest. And it's actually part of the fodder that led me to identity work. It was a time where I didn't even know who I was anymore. So I had gone on maternity leave. So I was pregnant. All of a sudden I wasn't earning an income. My body didn't look like like it used to. I didn't get any of my sense of identity from being this intelligent, articulate woman who had places to go and things to do. I was at home with a baby, struggling to know how to be a mom, and it really felt like an identity crisis. And that the fact that my identity was so rooted in what I did was what caused that identity crisis. And that's consistent for all humans. We have this sense of these layers of identity where our outer identity is what we do. It's the roles that we play. It's I'm the mother, I'm the wife, I'm the funny one, I'm the university graduate, I'm the successful businesswoman. That's the what of our identity. And anytime that what shifts, we get the identity wobbles. And then there's the how. There's the how we do things, like maybe that's based on personality. Like I'm the sort of person who's sassy, right? And maybe you find yourself in a situation where you have no capacity for being sassy. And you're like, I don't know how to act in this situation because actually the way I show up, my persona is rooted in me being sassy and funny. So that's why the identity work concentrates on the core identity, which is the who at the center of all of those things. And if you bring it back to the who, you get this fixed point on the horizon that will travel with you throughout life transitions. So, bringing it back to things like I'm a truth seeker. I am authentic, I am tender, I am affectionate. Those kind of things will actually transition with you through life changes, and they'll give you that real sense of stability. No matter how your outer world changes, you'll have an inner safety.
Which is so beautiful, because that reminds me of what you said at the start about how when we give almost giving our intuition over to somebody else, giving that power over, that once you really identify with who you are at the core, at the root of who you are, then you can really trust that intuition, because you'll know that it's from you and that you don't need the outside world to give you validation.
Yes, and that's been a huge part too. And I've even found that in relationships, especially in the last 3 or 4 years, is that the more you understand your own unique identity, you understand where you stop and another person starts, and you can be intrinsically motivated. And instead of people pleasing and trying to be the person that you think other people want you to be, you can be motivated by your own values. And it takes a lot of inner work, and also a lot of body mastery. It's not just a feeling thing, it's a embodied safety thing. You actually need to get really safe in all of the sensations in your body and really tune in to your breath. You need to be able to tune into what's going on in your body at any given time and really listen. And what I've found is that, especially in our culture, we often live like from the neck up. We're very disembodied. So our mind is like chatter, 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 whether we're aware of it or not. But it will talk over the top of our body. And it's almost like having a conversation with a friend who's just monologuing about their life, and they're not asking you, oh, what's going on in your life. The body is there with all of this amazing wisdom and discernment. And it cannot be corrupted, unlike the mind. And the body say, hey, mind, what about this? I've noticed this, so this is some information that you could use to make a decision. This is how you could follow your passion. This might help you with that, right? Intuitively. And the mind's like, don't worry about it. I got it all under control. I got it all figured out. I'm running my program. I'm, operating on self-protection and keeping up my image and all the rest of it. And you don't get this beautiful conversation going on between the mind and the body. So that's really important too, is to tuning into your body.
And I think tuning into the body is very difficult when people have had those disassociating experiences where they've learned to jump out. So coming back into the body can also be uncomfortable, because the body is heavy and the body actually does have a lot of feelings going on if you haven't tuned into it before. What are some techniques that you use to get more embodied within yourself?
It's such a journey. And I think that even if somebody hasn't had any cult-like experiences, just growing up as a woman in this society, we have learned from a very early age to either place a really high importance on our body and what it looks like, or how it performs, or a really low emphasis on our body. And either way creates disembodiment. So the journey that I went on, and the journey that I take clients on, is really first of all, getting a language. So it needs to start in the mind, because we need a language and a way to be able to describe it. But it's really about awareness and noticing different sensations, and then feeling safe enough to sit in them, because it can be really uncomfortable. Just say you're feeling a sense of grief, you missed out on something or you lost something, and to feel that grief in your body is excruciating, and until you understand what it is and the purpose that it serves. So I would always start with the framework, and then I would take people through a bunch of modalities. Breath work is one, varying forms of just mastering your breath. and being able to sink into that inhale and exhale and just be present with that. Touch, so different forms of touch, whether it's havening, that's one of my favorites, is the havening technique. Movement, I do ecstatic dance, and I kind of force all my clients to do it as well, but just movement, free form movement where you might be listening to music and you just allow your body to move with the music, and you tune it, you drop into this beautiful flow state and are very present. And then the final one would be sound. So, you could use things like a Himalayan sound bowl, or even just listening to frequency musics that will, different hertz, where you actually tune in with your nervous system and exhale. And with all of those modalities, they send a signal to the mind that it's safe for change. So if your body is in that state of safety, then your mind can actually start to tinker a little bit with your belief system, with your thoughts. If you don't have bodily safety, it will be an absolutely horrible experience to try and edit your thoughts because there's no safety.
Wow, that's such a good point, isn't it? Because we tend to jump in with the mind to try and heal things, even going back to old memories. But if you're in a disassociated type state, you're not even actually entering the body to feel what that, if we're doing inner child work, for instance, you're not feeling what that little child's actually going through because you're instead witnessing it instead of allowing that child to feel.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's really, I mean, I've been to psychologists and I think they're great, but that's what we call top-down therapy. What I do is bottom up. It's somatic. It's using the body, creating a sense of safety and calm to be able to then edit your mind.
That's very cool. So how have you found in terms of your identity changing? Because you did mention sort of work has been a big part of your identity. And I think a lot of people do identify with I'm this in terms of their job. For example, even my daughter, she's a pilot. So you get kind of caught up in these, especially like a lawyer, a doctor, all of those types of careers, very identity focused. But what about somebody else that's sort of like I'm an accountant or I'm a shop assistant?
Yeah. And look, I think different careers will have different levels of status associated with them. And so definitely being a lawyer had a status associated with it. And my own parents were like, do you really want to throw all that away? And luckily I had the perspective where I was like, I'm not throwing anything away. I'm actually like taking everything that I've learned and I'm using it in a different way. But once you learn to, with your identity work, once you learn to let go of the outer things, the peripheral things, it's actually a lot easier to make changes. For me, I was 10 years solid in my business doing image consulting and identity work. And what I didn't realize while I was doing it, I was so excited and so passionate about my work because it was stuff I was practicing on myself and then creating courses and immersion experience for clients. And I was seeing them get incredible results. And I was so wrapped up in that. I hadn't asked myself, like, to what end? Like, what am I trying to achieve? When will enough be enough? And it was 2022 in December where I decided to take a break and I had 4 weeks off. And I actually really sunk into this place where I realized my identity was actually really wrapped up in the work that I was doing and doing a lot of speaking and being online and being like the face of my business. And I realized there was a link between my identity being rooted in my business and my relationship with my father. I know it sounds really tenuous, but if you know anything about attachment theory, you understand that in that first 7 years of your life, when your identity is formed, is also the time in which you are learning about attachment and you're learning how your parents are going to provide for and protect you, and your relationship between the masculine and the feminine is developed. And what occurred to me in December 2022 was that my business was a representation of my father, and my effort in the business was me trying to please my father and move towards my father, who was, I was anxiously attached to him and he was an avoidant, right? So I was always trying to impress him and chase after him and be, look at me, I'm amazing, love me, love me. So I recognized this correlation. I was like, whoa, this is heavy. And as I started to heal that and work on that and rebuild my relationship with my father, what I noticed was the desire and the will and the drive to be in business actually really started to dwindle. And I'm like, I'm enough. I actually don't feel like I have anything else to prove to do. And so I went on this journey, and this is the journey I've been on for the last year, is what would it look like if I just be? Do I have value if I just be? And the other thing I didn't mention was the cult that I grew up in, because it was legalistic, it was very performance based. So you had to do all these things. You had to keep up these appearances and jump through all these hoops. And it was very stringent about like what you ate and how you looked. And there was this strong performance mentality to it. So this idea of just being and not contributing anything of value, not, keeping up appearances of being successful or any of this, and just being, I was so scared of this to begin with. I'm like, oh, and luckily I have amazing friends who just reflected my value back to me just as me, with nothing to, they're just, you being you is enough. I remember laying on the couch just as I was going through this identity crisis around letting go of my business. And friends would say to me, like, we never cared about that anyway. Like, we wanted you. Like, you're the draw card. And so over the last year, I've really been learning what it means that it's my essence that makes a difference in a room. And the transformational power wasn't from the business structure that I set up. It was through being in relationship with me, because of what I carry, the codes that I carry, the experiences that I've had, and the way I've alchemized those. Just naturally in relationship, people are impacted by that. And I don't actually have to do anything. And it's funny because I've been sitting in a whole heap of training recently as a participant, and I'm watching the facilitator, and I'm like, there's this little voice that says, but that's what you should be doing, and you're really good at that. And then I'm like, no, receive, just be and receive. And it's the most healing thing in the world, because that feeling as a little girl that I have to do something for my father to receive love is being absolutely reversed, where I'm like, I have to do nothing and I'm receiving everything. So yeah.
Oh, I love that. And to be honest, the past few podcast interviews I've had, it has been totally talking about receiving. It gets there, we get there somehow in the end, because we're so resistant to that premise of being able to just be. And gosh, the receiving is so feminine. When I heard you talking about your story with your dad and being a business, it is a very masculine way of being, is it? Because it's all that do. And to be feminine is to receive. And it's lovely that you said, like before as well, about being feminine. There's all this stuff about us being mothers and all the things that we have to do from society, and being able to be, what a fabulous gift you've given to yourself.
And look, I have been on a journey with the feminine since I was working with a spiritual abuse counselor, probably about 5-6 years ago. I've been on this journey of coming back into my feminine in so many different ways. I noticed the way it started to affect the way I dressed, a lot softer, the way I wore my hair, the way I interact and touch people when I'm speaking, the way I hold people's eye contact, and even the way that I was consulting and coaching. Instead of being the person with all the answers, it was more a case of, hey, what would it look like if I came alongside you and connected you with your own power and nurtured you as you were working through your things, instead of needing to be the guru and the one who had it all together. It gave me so much more freedom just to be authentic and to share from a place of, hey, I struggle with things too. Here's what I'm learning and the skills that I have and how I'm using those tools to reflect on my own life. And I could teach from that place rather than needing to have this very squeaky clean, perfect persona, which of course flows into things like personal branding and photography. So many brands out there feel absolutely strangled by the brand that they've created, which needs to look a certain way. And just being able to drop into feeling, like, how does it feel to live my life and do my business and be myself from the inside? Does it feel satisfying? What would make it more expansive, right? And start showing up like that. And it's a whole new ball game. And in fact, because I still care about, and I love, you can see, I love aesthetically beautiful things. I love the harmony of it. But really, even my styling system became this whole process of, it's not about looking aesthetically harmonious. It's, are my aesthetics harmonious with my spirit? Does the inside match the outside? Are there ways in which I'm masking myself in how I show up as opposed to expressing myself? And really my whole methodology became, all right, let's heal that mind-body connection. Let's get really comfortable in being and feeling and expressing. And now let's show you how to do that with colors and clothes.
Yeah, which is beautiful, and definitely working far out now when I try and think back about how many years I've worked as a stylist. I think I'm at 20. I'm at
Wow.
19 or 20 years I've done that work. And at the start, I never felt it was superficial, but from an external viewpoint, people that aren't doing the work, when you're working with a client, most of my clients, it wasn't about how they felt on the outside. It was what was going on the inside. And you described that just so beautifully. And so for anybody listening from two image consultants, well, like, you have to feel your best, right? Like, just what it makes you, inspires you and makes you feel good. And it's really not about what other people think. But nevertheless, when you feel good, people are going to comment.
Absolutely. And there is like, there's a science and an art to it. You know, I taught a method of dressing at the end called intuitive dressing. And really it was like tapping into the different energies of like earth, fire, water. And it's like recognizing the energy that is in your body right now and deciding for yourself, how do I want to feel today? And then there is a correlation between different colors and different stylistic pieces, which will help you step into that feeling. And yeah, so if you don't have the tools or the skills, yeah, you can get help, but it's a completely different paradigm. You're not fixing anything. You're not, putting a band-aid or trying to zhuzh someone up. You're actually like freeing them and saying, hey, here are the keys to your own life. You get to express and show up how you see fit every day. And you know that that will actually impact the people around you instead of waiting for the people around you to validate that you're enough.
That's so true. I love that you used earth elements. I think that that's really unique. And what a wonderful way to get into that movement in the morning to go, oh, am I feeling fiery, or am I, yeah, how am I feeling today? Or am I feeling more flowy and watery? Yeah.
Do I want to, like with the water one, it's like, do I have a day where I want to be creative and be very introverted and reflective and, think about concepts like, all right, I'm going to dress in some dark colors, some blues. I'm going to have spiral motifs, or, just things like that where you can go, that actually conjures up that energy of like inner reflection and peace, as opposed to, I'm going to go out and dance salsa tonight, and I'm going to be flamboyant and fiery, and it's going to be the yellows and the oranges and the reds and the pinks and the metallics and the pointiness and all of those kind of things where, there's a time for all of those energies. And I think a lot of styling approaches give you, this is your style, and you're kind of stuck. And what happens if you want to flow and grow and experience different things? There's nowhere to go with it. So it ends up just reinforcing the persona that we've created. And personas or personalities, the Greek word for that is mask. So it is the mask that we've created to show up in society, that we've learned that this is how we get our needs met. This is how we are acceptable to societies. And if we just show this part of ourselves, what about all the rest of us? So getting to a place where you can integrate all the parts of yourself. And today I want to experience this part of myself. Tomorrow I want to experience this part of myself. And you get to choose from the whole, and you get to have that feeling of being a whole spirit.
I love that. And you can start to change through your clothing. And I think it is a very interesting way. Both of us sort of started in that way and then ended up working our way back to self.
Yeah, I take it for granted sometimes because it's so, now I don't even think about it. I'm like, do. But I recognize, if you are a woman who struggles with what you look like in the mirror and how to get dressed every day, it actually is very worthwhile having that those tools and those skills so that you get freed in that area, so you can just concentrate back on self and spirit. Sometimes I underplay the importance of it because it's no longer an issue for me, but it was an issue for me at one point. I just can barely remember the time in which I was at war with my appearance. It's just so I have such a beautiful, loving relationship with my body and my image that, yeah, sometimes I forget it's a thing.
It is very true. I think after years of doing it, because everything does coordinate in the wardrobe and you have those different pieces for every occasion, you can forget what it feels like to not have that. I have this image still in my mind of these very, very awful pink wedges that I used to own that I thought would match everything. And what I wore them with, I cringe.
I know, right? But the thing is, and this is what empirical studies show, is that women won't express themselves when they don't like the way that they look. They're 80% less likely to speak their mind when they're uncomfortable with the way that they look. So you've got this external pressure. They're almost objectifying themselves. Do I look good enough to actually be authentic? Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that makes so much sense. And even when we hear client feedback, you would have had where people will say, oh gosh, people are taking me more seriously now, or people are saying that they're listening to me more. And yeah, because they're more willing to talk.
Yeah,
That's
and
cool.
there's also the other burden, which is when we don't like the way that we look, we don't feel comfortable in our body, we are disembodied, we don't feel the sensations in our body, we actually aren't truly in tune with ourselves or our intuition or what we need, want, and desire. And it's a catch-22 that way as well. So I think that's why it is an important stepping stone in becoming liberated, becoming conscious. It is something that in the 3D reality we do need to deal with so that it's not an impediment to us, stepping into our greater purpose.
And so before we wrap up, I'd love to know, where do you see Emma's identity going? Are you going to have a name change? Are you going to, how far are you going to take this identity movement that you're going through?
Oh, look, I'm at this place in my spiritual journey where identity to me at the moment it's important to establish identity, but I'm actually in the identity destruction phase where it's like breaking down the barrier between myself and other people and not othering other people. So it's like seeing myself in other people and other people being a mirror to my spirit as well. And so I'm in this interesting place where I'm very much waiting on divine prompting and divine direction. And I have a couple of things in the pipeline. I'm actually doing some study this year in the area of somatic sexology. I think this
Ooh.
is a really interesting area as well, because it is very body based and it actually is a great tool for people to actually explore the psyche. But I'm not sure. The answer is I'm not sure. I'm still seeing clients part-time, but it's more the type of clients that I'm really attracted to working with are ones who are really surrendered to doing this inner work and experiencing and having like a spiritual experience as opposed to, hey, could you dress me for this photo shoot? All these things are valid, but for me, there's no fun in it if it's not doing this consciousness work. So I'm not sure. Stay tuned. Watch this space. I'll let you know when I know, but I'm definitely not forcing any structure. I'm actually really sitting in the feminine now and allowing ideas to generate. There'll be a certain point in which I have to go, okay, if I don't take action now, that's just passivity. But yeah, I'm also not trying to rush it. It hasn't quite been a year. And I think, yeah, I definitely need to give it the year.
Yeah, I love that we never stop learning, right? Lifelong learning. And I love this new course for you. Sounds amazing. I could totally see you as a sexologist. For anybody that's not seeing how sexy you are, jump online because you've got it all.
Oh, it's a slippery slope, right? When my husband has said that to me, he's like, who are you? Like, you're in your 40s and you are so much more embodied and sexual in the eros energy than when I met you, like in your 20s. And I'm like, it just keeps getting better. And that is, I guess that's the message that I would love to leave with your listeners is this journey of to self, to identity. It leads you to your connection with source, your connection with others, your relationships become enriched, and all of a sudden you can show up so much more alive and more expressive and bigger and bolder than you, and more vulnerable than you ever were before. So it unlocks all of this resource in the forms of connections, and sexuality is just part of that. Sexuality is an extension of identity, and when you understand that is your gift, that is your expression, it doesn't exist for anyone else, it exists for you, for your pleasure, that you get to share with others. You really get to open this beautiful box that maybe has been, there's been a little lid on.
Oh, I love that. Thank you so much for our conversation today. I'm sure everybody listening has got a lot out of it, and I will put links if people do want to reach out and contact you, and definitely I'll be watching this space.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the conversation. You're amazing.
As we end today's episode of the Divine Style podcast, I extend my deepest gratitude for your presence and openness on this journey of self-love, self-discovery, and spiritual growth. Farewell for now, and may your journey inward bring you the self-love you seek.